Go. First of all, happy Rosh Chodesh Adar, everyone. It's Mishenichnas Adar Marbin B'Simcha, and it's Ein Simcha Ela Torah. So it's a good place for us to give. This is our last shiur of this series, which focuses on the Ramban, the Lion of Barcelona, and today we will go through the Ramban in his own words, summarizing the aspect of the Ramban as fighting Milchemes Hashem, the wars for the minds and hearts of the Jewish people. In full battle gear against the influences that would look to tear the Jewish people away from their basic faith, which in his day represented the Christian world, which the Dominican friars, it was the early, remember, this took place in the year 1263, which as we said before, was the beginning of the 6th millennium, the millennium of the Geula, in which all of the Mefarshim on the Gemara Sanhedrin and others identify that this last 1,000 years is the second half of the era of Mashiach, meaning it's now possible for the Mashiach to appear at any moment. And that truly was the Ramban's opinion. It was amazing. He wrote gematrias and forecasts to strengthen the heart of his fellow Jews that the Mashiach could appear as early as 1290. That's what he told them. Wow. In his Sefer HaGeula. And he based on a gematrias, based on the psukim at the end of Dvarim. So we're going to go through this. The topic really is the Ramban on the Geula. Today is the Ramban's opinion about the Geula, and this was the basic battle that he fought for the hearts of the Jewish people in his last few years of his life, when he turned 70 years old in the year 1263, and he only lived another 3 years, and he accomplished a great deal in his final years. Remember, we said that he moves to Eretz Yisrael as a result of this debate. And when I talk about the debate, I'm talking about the great debate of 1263, which took place in the court of King James of Aragon, King James I of Aragon, who was a missionary king, but also very kind of tolerant and willing to listen, fair-minded in his own way.
Not anti-Semitic.
Not as anti-Semitic as the friars themselves. Mm-hmm. And what happened was that there was a meshumad. Our biggest problems are never goyim. Our biggest problems always arise from the inside, the Jewish people themselves. And there was a meshumad, a convert. Not a convert, can't convert. A meshumad to Christianity. His name was Pablo Cristiani, Friar Paul. That's how he's referred to by the Ramban, who came up with this brilliant idea. I mean, in retrospect, it's like so ridiculous, but in those days, even the Ramban explains that it's ridiculous, but it shows you how extreme things were. He said, I'm going to prove to you, not from the Tanakh, that Mashiach, his Messiah, otherwise known as Yeshu, the Natsri, arrived, but that in the Talmud, the rabbis identify his coming. What he did was they took the Talmud and said, okay, if we can't prove it to you from Tanakh, we're going to prove it to you from your own Talmud. Why? Because the Jewish people did not buy any of the interpretations of Tanakh. They didn't take it so seriously. Although today, as you'll know, every missionary will try to do what they did 1,000 years ago, which is misconstrue psukim in the Torah and claim that was some sort of prophecy about the arrival of Yeshu. That's the modus operandi. There's some very, very good tapes out there, how to debunk a missionary, by Jews for Judaism, by Tovia Singer, or Mati Berger from Torah did a lot of work that way. They give you in 2 minutes how to slug up all the ridiculous things. But you see, people who are not educated and people who don't know, and you're coming with the authority of the Torah, which is what they did. That's why everything is a fraud. Christianity is a fraud. Okay, Islam is a fraud. Right? Why? Because what they essentially did is took the truth of Judaism and built on it their own understanding. And this is what's known as replacement theology. Replacement theology means we're not going to get away with saying that we're going to start our own religion from scratch, because no one will believe us. But since Judaism is well established and there's a Bible and the whole world knows about that story, what we'll do is we'll take that story and we'll add a different ending, their own quote-unquote happy ending.
Because they weren't Jews.
Because they want legitimacy.
Yeah, they want.
And they also want Jews, but they want everybody. But how are they going to get anybody? Because they want anybody. How are you going to get legitimacy? Well, they can say, everybody knows, the Bible, the Jewish people, the whole thing. And, but the Jews sinned and now they've been replaced, Lahavdil, it's like Donald Trump's apprentice. You're fired. He said Jewish people were fired. Right? It's a reality show. And of course, that's ridiculous. Because as we've seen time and time again, Chazal emphasize in the Mefarshei HaTorah how no matter what Klal Yisrael does, there is a bris between Hashem and Am Yisrael, which is why it's a very interesting thing that the bris milah is one of the mitzvos that's kept by even the most distant Jews. Even Jews who are really antagonistic to Torah and mitzvos will do bris milah. Why? So, because bris milah is the identifier that you're part of this larger bris. In fact, at Har Sinai, what did they do? They did. First, they had to do Karban Pesach, and that required a bris milah. And then at Har Sinai, they did a bris with karbanos, right? So that was it. The Bechorim did a bris with karbanos. There's a bris between Hashem. It's based on the Torah. Now, even if the Jewish people temporarily themselves reject Torah, which has happened in many occasions, in many different circumstances, the bond between Hashem, the Torah, and Klal Yisrael is unbroken, and there will always be people who observe Torah, and eventually we have promises in the book of Dvarim, which is one of the psukim that the Ramban analyzes in his Sefer Geula, V'shavtas Hashem Elokecha, all the Jewish people will return, which is a huge issue about whether the Geula is dependent on the tshuva of Am Yisrael. It's a big question mark. Big question mark. Do the Jews have to do tshuva or not? So, this is a debate. And basically, there are different opinions, but the base normative opinion is that, yes, the Jews will do tshuva, but what's going to compel them to do tshuva? Something has to happen. So maybe, unfortunately, they'll have to go through difficult time and Yisurim and various things until they decide to do tshuva. But tshuva will be done. So it's better to do tshuva voluntarily, and that's what we're hoping. I think that's our responsibility, especially Jews here in Eretz Yisrael who are Anglos and this and that, to influence other Anglos. I'm going to give an advertisement for something we're doing this summer. Maybe you're going to like it. I'm working on a project where the Maccabee athletes are coming to Israel. You know about the Maccabee? It started in 1932. It's very interesting. Right at the time Hitler came to power, they were driving with motorcycles through the streets of Europe saying, "Come to Israel and be strong Jews." Interesting. It was interesting. It was the beginning of a change. And except that, they did a tricky thing, that they associated Maccabees with what the Maccabees fought against, which is interesting. The Maccabees fought against the whole thing about the public games of the Greek games and the culture. And so they did a brilliant move. They said, Jews believe in Hanukkah. That's one of the things, like Bris Milah, that's mostly observed mitzvah in the world. Did you know that? People who do not keep Yom Kippur light Hanukkah candles. Why? Because
most people keep Yom Kippur. It's like they call the 2-day-year Jews. They go to
Halavai. Halavai.
They might go to Krum Shul. They might hear even the shofar through microphones and all that stuff.
Believe it or not, they've done surveys. The Pew survey, which came out just recently about Jewish observance in the States, assimilation and so on, rated which mitzvahs are most observed both in Israel and in America, and it's a no-brainer. Hanukkah candles are the single most observed mitzvah of American Jews, and including Jews who do not observe Yom Kippur. Now, the interesting part about the Hanukkah is, like the Bris Milah, as we know that in Hanukkah, what was the gzeira against the Jewish people? Not to do Bris Milah. So that's like kind of the bare bones identity of a Jew. If a Jew has a Bris Milah, is willing to light a Hanukkah candle and identify himself publicly as a Jew, then you're a Jew. You know what I'm saying? If a person completely renounces himself, as this Pablo Cristiani did, and said, no, I'm a Catholic, and so on and so forth, so therefore, it's unless they do tshuva in the end, it's very hard to identify them. as being part of Am Yisrael, being part. The Rambam says that if a Jew refuses to identify with the Jewish people, and there are many who have done that in their pain, in their suffering, in their history, even a person who likes to hear about Israel, not observant at all, but they want to hear about Israel. So that itself is sort of an identifier. That the name Yisrael is relevant to them. The name, the word, the title. So I say that these athletes are coming in, and Blian Har Baruch Hashem, I just received permission from the very wonderful head of the Maccabi Games, who's a traditional person. He said, every one of them has to experience Shabbos. Every one of them has to experience lectures about Judaism. And what we want to do is bring in, from Kiruv professionals, there are going to be 30 Shabbos locations throughout this country. The first Shabbos in July.
I know Melanie, she used to live here. Her daughter used to be very involved with White City. Her daughter is very managed, lives in Yappo.
Yeah.
And she does this stuff like a lot of times
Right.
with other people.
Well, we're talking about kids coming from 80 countries,
How many?
different languages, thousands.
Oh, thousands?
Thousands.
My neighbor's son is coming.
For the Maccabi Games?
Not religious, not religious.
Not religious?
There
Okay.
are some Shabbos.
Yes, and I'm making an advertisement. Anybody who knows someone who participated in the Maccabi Games who is now religious, please let me know immediately.
Who is now or was
Who
there-
is now, or was, yeah. Either way, either they became religious or they came religious. It doesn't matter which country, or if they might be, if they're here in Israel.
They had made Ali already.
If they're living in Israel, or they might be willing to come.
Gibraltar, a whole bunch.
So this is the plan. So in general, the idea is that the Jewish people have always been challenged in their belief, challenged. So here was one of the points of the biggest challenge, and how appropriate that it was at the start of the 6th millennium, the time in which there was a fever pitch about Geula. That always happens when the Jews are terribly persecuted. When Jews are terribly persecuted, the interest in Mashiach skyrockets, because they can't understand, their world is crumbling. And they're trying to make sense out of it. And there was an all-on assault against the Jewish people at this time that started at the time of the Ramban. It really started then. And it started in a serious way, in a really serious way. The Christians opened a new game, and that game was to trick the loyal Jews who know that the Talmud is true, to say that the Talmud includes Yoshka. Sounds like what today? Those people who put on taluses and yarmulkes and call themselves J for J, J for J. They're doing the same thing. This is the oldest game in the world, and it's the biggest fraud in the world. Wrap yourself in a talus and say, oh yeah, you can wear a talus and be for Yoshka. You can learn Talmud and be for Yoshka. It's outrageous. So the Ramban says a few very important things. Okay, I'm gonna take them one at a time. Okay, he wrote a sefer called Sefer HaGeula. His Sefer Geula was his treatise to answer the pressure that was being brought to bear on Jews to convert. The persuasion that they were being held on. He says, let me tell you authentic Torah thinking about how the Geula works. Okay, that's number one. And number two, he recorded every word of the debate. He wrote, and by the way, what does he call it? He calls it the Milchemes Milchema Chova. Now, if you remember, we said that one of the criterion for a person or an event or a process that's called Mashiach ben Ephraim or Mashiach ben Yosef, which starts with the era of 1240, with the 6th millennium. We're waiting for that first stage of Mashiach, known as Mashiach ben Yosef. Is that one of his jobs is to fight Milchemes Hashem, to fight the battles of Hashem. It's not ironic, but obvious that the Ramban, this was his war of Hashem. To stand toe-to-toe with these Meshumadim in the presence of the king and duke it out. And what was the debate? Does the Torah Sheba'al Peh and the Torah Sheba'chsav corroborate with the claims of these Meshumadim or not? And of course he started the debate by saying that it's ridiculous to hold debate, because if it's true, this is what the Ramban said, if it's true that the rabbis of the Talmud accepted Yoshka, then why aren't they promoting it today? Because it's 1,000 years later, and we don't do that. We don't do Yoshka. So it's ridiculous to assume that Talmudic Jews who follow halacha would. So he made the whole debate condition on this. This whole thing is ridiculous. But if you want to talk, we can talk.
Was it a pervasive phenomenon that there were thousands of Jews who were going along with Christianity, or was it like kind of emokad, small? How big?
It's a very important question. In general, in Spain, because of this was a couple hundred years of intense missionary activity, which culminated in the Inquisition. Remember, the Dominican friars that started this debate with the Ramban, it was a portent of everything that was going to happen.
How many years?
Well, 1492 is the Gerush Svarad,
Yeah.
right? So you're looking at 1240 to 250 years.
All right, so
Now, here's
It's a
what.
long time.
Well, here's what I'm going to add. What started in 1240, 1250, 1260, the time of the Ramban, culminated in the expulsion from Spain by who? King Ferdinand and Isabella, who
Yeah.
were Catholics. Well, Torquemada was the chief, and he was a Dominican, and that's why the Dominican order.
It was he poisoned them.
Well, yeah, exactly. But that started already in the time of the Ramban in 1263. That was already starting. And they, of course, utilized the Jewish Mishumadim as their best weapon because they knew something about Judaism, basically. They knew, you can talk to the Jews and convince them because you know their language, you know their customs, you know their traditions.
You know why you left it.
Yeah,
That's also why they know why they left it.
and that's why they left, because they could get a job. You know, they could get a really good job.
People could try to convince because they could say
What's the
whatever they
Mishumadim?
want.
The Mishumadim are Jewish apostates. That they join the church and they rise to prominence and importance because they know about Judaism. They know
And they
know Hebrew. They know Tanakh.
Missionaries made them, or they became.
They became the missionaries.
So how did they leave? They would just went off the derech, or was there a?
There are people like in this generation from the Holocaust. They were
Okay.
hated by the monasteries.
They went off.
Look, there were people who went off because it was power, it was money, it was very seductive. You have to understand that the church and the state were one. The separation of
The
church,
church was
the separation of church and state begins in 1492. You know why? Because Columbus discovers America, and in America would be the first country that would separate church and state, and then France would follow, and and Europe would follow. So ironically, when it reached its pinnacle, that church and state was trying to remove the Jewish people from Torah. In other words, the how shall I say, the epitome of the Catholic persecution in terms of the Jews of Spain. Of course, it would continue all the generations, but the Jews of Spain anyway, to destroy that great Torah civilization. Hashem always prepares the next thing. Hikdim refuah lamaka. And when we, if you wish, we can reconvene with another series taking us from 1492 and the events of 1492 and what happened to the Jewish people.
So
Geula.
continue.
If we'll continue, that will be the next series, if you desire. What's that?
What's the answer to the question?
So the answer to your question is, this process was going on. There were certain individuals who sought power and fame, and they knew that if they betrayed their own people, they would rise to prominence. Otherwise, they would be schmendricks.
The Jews were.
And then there were other compelling reasons, like in the Holocaust, where Jews could not uproot themselves so easily from their families, from their parnasa, from their this, and they chose to go underground, and that's the movement of the conversos. The conversos were thousands and thousands of Jews who outwardly said, yes, we'll agree to be Christian, but inwardly kept Jewish. And today, I have to go too far, we're finding
Loads.
loads and loads of anusim, of conversos, they call them.
The
They have-
Anusim are the same as conversos.
and they say that in the blood of Jewish people flows freely in the veins of the Spanish. How many Jews are so
Jewish.
genetically at least, halachically Jewish, but genetically have a connection. And it's interesting, but when there's a genetic connection and there's an interest, people can come back and convert. It just seems to be an innate thing.
It's quite a big
The whole
movement.
thing through.
I've watched things on it. It's fascinating.
It's a whole story.
And it's amazing that they're still.
Even that person who was killed by the Figura 2 years ago by the train. She had just allowed her to convert. She was from that type of family.
So the answer to your question was, Some of them did it for fame and fortune. Some of them did it for expedience. And then I would say the most frum element, you know what I'm saying? The quote unquote very orthodox element and most traditional element left. They just left. They followed the Torah leadership and they left. They said, if we cannot openly practice Yiddishkeit, we're not staying.
They left Spain.
They left Spain.
And they went to Portugal?
Initially, they went to, you know what? That's going to be for the next
Sorry,
series.
sorry.
We'll start with Gershavat, because Gershavat is so important because what it did is it sets the stage for the rest of the
Who
millennium.
was that the Flourish in the Chumash that he left?
Barbanel. He was the finance minister to Ferdinand's. He says, stay with us. You'll be a mashumad. You'll stay with us. Keep your job. Yeah, they'll do what you want. Right.
Were the Meshumids always accepted? In other words, did the Christians believe that that these people really were Christians?
No, that was the Inquisition. The Inquisition wasn't against open Jews. The open Jews had to leave. The Inquisition was against the conversos that they shouldn't go back to Judaism. Those were the people that were burned at the stake. They didn't burn the Barbanel at the stake. Barbanel says, I'm leaving. We're out of here. So the people that left were not the target of the Inquisition. The target of the Inquisition were always the hidden Jews.
The converse.
And when they outed them as being secretly Jewish, they would burn them.
No, but I mean the ones that are openly
The
Christian.
Meshumatim who
They're
said,
not the conversos.
That is the ones that,
the Meshumatim you said were.
the ones who were openly Christian, who really believed it, I it's hard to know. I have to believe that the overwhelming majority of them were conversos.
There weren't that many really then.
No, there were some, It's a very good question. It's actually a historical question and it requires some serious study. But from my understanding, again, the really observant group left. The group that was maybe observant or traditional but compromised because of their home circumstances went underground, and then a certain number of them, became apostates.
It wasn't like the Shoah. If you had Jewish blood, whether you believed it in Christianity or not, you were destroyed.
That's what I'm
If
saying.
they were showed, they weren't.
It's like the Hanukkah versus the Purim.
The
Hanukkah
Hanukkah
was the Shoah.
Hanukkah was like Purim, and the Hanukkah was like that. Was
Right.
the Spanish decision.
That's what I was
I want to
thinking.
say, it strengthens what you're saying about, like first there has to be like this gullus, and then you can really work on the geula. So it just makes so much sense to hear, because everyone is leaving, like what was once, like the golden age, and then like the spirit of believing that geula is coming becomes so much more powerful and logical to the masses.
And here's what I want to tell you something very, very important. So were all those people wrong? Do you know how many people were walking around with the Ramban Sefer Geula in the year 1270 saying Mashiach's going to be here in 20 years? Because the Ramban wrote all the gematrias from the book of Dvarim. So the Ramban himself asks on himself that question. He says, doesn't it say in the Gemara, Sanhedrin, Tipach rucham shel mechashve ketzin? You're not supposed to speculate about the Geula because if people get disappointed, they're going to go off the derech. And that did happen too. So the Ramban gives the answer. First, it's important because I really believe the more I learn about it, the more I review about it, learn about it. The whole modern era of Jewish people starts with the Ramban. This is the start of the modern era, right here. He reconnects. He revives the Yishuv in Yerushalayim. He's the one, single-handedly, by buying a shul in the old city. We mentioned other shurim. He rekindles Jewish life in Yerushalayim, and everybody admits that there was, from the day he arrived till now, there was uninterrupted Jewish presence. Whereas for the 1,000 years before, it was spotty, very spotty. Remember, when the Ramban arrives in Yerushalayim after this debate, he found 2 Jews. 2? And he used to make a secret minyan, secret minyan, but it used to make a minyan in some abandoned building on Shabbos. Jews had to come from the villages. It was nothing. It was 1,000 years of pure Gullus Romi, the Gullus of Rome. So I have to go through a few points with you that are very, very important, okay? So in terms of the debate, and in terms of what the Sefer Geula taught. Okay, point number 1 that the Ramban makes is that Edom and Rome are identical. In other words, Sefer Daniel speaks about the concept of 4 Golios. Everybody knows the idea of 4 Golios is a cornerstone of our understanding of the Galut and Geula process, is that there's going to be Arba Golios, right? It's a theme that recurs itself on the Seder night, etc., etc. But in the ancient times, the Edomites were not Europeans. They were basically Arabs. They weren't Mishmaelim themselves, but they were a Semitic people, right? Because they're Semitic. And they lived in Jordan, basically in Jordan. Midian was in present-day Jordan. That's where Yisro came from. Aqaba, on the other side of Eilat, you can just go across the bridge, and you're in Midian. So Midian, this way, Jethro town. And the Esav's descendants were there in that desert area. So how did they become Rome, and how did they become Christians? So this is what the Ramban explains, that in the key bridge to that idea is the book of Daniel. The book of Daniel was written in the interim period between the first and second Beis HaMikdash. Where were the Jews? Who exiled the Jews, of course? The first Beis HaMikdash, we know. Bavel, the Babylonians, right? Nebuchadnezzar, Melech Bavel. Very important person. And his attendant, his wise man, par excellence, was none other than Daniel. Okay? Does anybody remember why in the book of Daniel, all of a sudden Daniel, the Jew, and his cohorts, who were his friends? Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, right? Why did they rise to such prominence so quickly? Besides their inherent brilliance, wisdom, and good looks, it says, by the way. But they were the Chachmei Yerushalayim, which was a prize. Everybody knew the Jews. They wanted the Jewish knowledge and wisdom, but they wanted their covert knowledge also, their knowledge of God, and their knowledge of all things mysterious and unknown to the others. Nebuchadnezzar has a dream, and he forgets his dream. But he knows it was a terribly disturbing dream. Gathers together, this is in the first proclamation of Daniel, gathers together all his wise men and says, if you don't tell me what my dream was, I'm going to kill all of you. And they said to him, listen, we can interpret your dream, but how could we know your dream? You don't even remember your dream. How are we supposed to know your dream? He says, okay, I'm going to kill you. And he starts killing all of them. All of a sudden, Daniel steps forward and says, God, stop. Give me a little time, and I'm going to come back with an answer. He davens, and Hashem reveals to him in the dream the following vision of Daniel, which is very important to understand the Ramban. Here's the dream. A beast, among the many dreams that Daniel had, it's prophecies he had, but he chapped the dream of Nebuchadnezzar, which was this: a man with a golden head, okay, silver arms, bronze torso, steel legs, and toes mixed with ceramic and steel, iron. All right, and it was going around, and that was the dream. And eventually it's crushed by like a mountain, and the mountain grows. And that's basically the dream. So he says, you got it, that was the dream. He says, let me interpret it for you. The gold head is you, Nebuchadnezzar. That represents the Galus of Bavel, the dominion. You are the golden head. He was really the emperor of the world. He was the greatest non-Jewish king of all time, post-Churban, okay? In fact, he's like an anti-Shlomo HaMelech. That's really how you want to understand it. Shlomo HaMelech in the negative. Just like Shlomo HaMelech was the center of the universe in his day, so too, Nebuchadnezzar was the center of the world. He's the golden head. He was the most powerful ruler of all time. Then the next that took over, next empire that defeats Bavel, soon after Nebuchadnezzar dies, is Paras and Madai, right hand, left hand of silver. The Median Persians. These are the Iranians, by the way. These are the Iranians, which is why when the Geula is so close, they come back for all these people come back for a bow. You know that they get all the cast characters in for one big, So Iraq becomes very important. Who's in Iraq right now? ISIS. And Paras and Madai becomes very important. Iran. A couple of years ago, they were nothing. Before 1980, who knew from them? They were a country that they did business with Israel. Iranians are very good at business, by the way. It's sad, but in Southern California, there's like 300, maybe by now 1 million Persians, do you know? Most of them of Jewish origin. And they're the rags to riches stories. They even have like shows about them, how they came and they were eating out of garbage pails, and now they're multi-millionaires, and they are fabulously wealthy. It's like the nouveau riche, and basically they indulge themselves in all the extravagances of California, and they're not stupid people. They're not dumb. Iranians are formidable, especially in business. The king of Persia was the biggest taxer of the Jews during his era. The Persian kings were rapaciously seeking wealth. They're called like the bear, which is constantly eating. A bear eats. That was even the image of Daniel in the dream. Okay, fine. So in this dream, the silver arms, they were not as strong as the gold head, but they were two of them, and they were powerful. And hands take. The bronze torso was starting with Alexander the Great. The body. Yes, the body. The torso, the stomach, whatever. That's Alexander the Great. What's that?
Alexander the Great.
The Macedonian Alexander Mokdon, which is the Greek Empire, which folds into the steel legs, the iron eggs, which is Rome. Steel is the hardest metal. It's what you make swords out of. They are the most warlike, and they represent Edom. So the Roman Empire, both the one that destroys the Beis HaMikdash and the one that follows the destruction of Beis HaMikdash, were identified by the Ramban and by all Chazal. It says it's a given that is called, and based on the interpretation of Daniel, that this is Malchus Edom. He brings the Ibn Ezra. Ibn Ezra wants to say that maybe it's Ishmael, and no, he says that last leg, those legs, that last stage of Geula, of Galus is Edom, and here's the problem. We're going to stay with it until the end.
Who is Edom?
Till the end.
It's not heard a few times where Edom rolls into Yeshua. The last goes at the end. It's a mixture.
Hold up, I'll get there 1 second. So, who's Edom? Edom is Rome. Romi. That's the Chiddush of the Ramban.
Oh, Western world.
Even though Edom was a Semitic people that lived in Jordan, when the Jewish people came out of Mitzrayim, and Edom didn't let them enter their land, it was over there,
Where's Har Seir?
Well, Har Seir, and there is a Har Seir, right?
That is, when Hashem says Har Seir in the Chumash,
right.
it's really in
That's it.
So why?
Va'alu Moshim b'Har Tzion lishpat Har Seir. That the Ramban quotes. He says that's going to be till we get to that point. It's all Rome.
It's on the other side of the Jordan.
All Rome. Well, that's the original place.
That
You
the
went like when
same?
Yaakov and Esav make their split.
Esav leaves Eretz
No, I
Yisrael.
know, but he goes to that.
Right there. Right there.
Yeah, why is it the same? I don't understand. Romaim and then Edom. Why is it the same?
Okay, so let's explain. Because the understanding was that since Rome is going to be the final leg of the Galus, represented by Rome, the ones who destroyed the second Beis HaMikdash, would last until the Geula. It has to permutate into many forms. Now, in history, let's understand what happened here. What that means is as follows.